James, switching topics for a moment, though. Almost 2 years prior, I was mentioning to watch the Ukraine in some of my blog posts. The outbreak for a really bad situation will develop over in Ukraine. Now, the Mediterranean, I mentioned, will keep many eyes focused their way, but the real story is going to be coming out of the Ukraine. Where do you see this developing from here?
Well, currently there's a bit of a lull, but I think Russia's long-term strategic aims haven't changed, and it's in direct opposition to the sovereignty goal of the Ukrainian people. They're at loggerheads, so something has to give, and I'm afraid it's probably going to be the Ukrainians in the long run, because let's face it, Russia is the big kid on the block, the bully on the block. So, and the Russian military juggernaut really has not slowed down much since the end of the Cold War. They still have a tremendous amount of armored vehicles, of artillery, of surface-to-surface missiles, both lighter missiles like the BM-21, which is what's commonly called a Katyusha mobile rocket launcher. Those are the same sort of rockets that are landing on Israel, all the way up to the Frog missile, which has both conventional warheads or nuclear warheads. So in the long run, I think the handwriting is kind of on the wall. I would not want to be living in the Ukraine because even if they have some kind of short-term settlement with limited autonomy for the Donetsk region, in the long term, the prospects are not good.
Mm-hmm. Once again, I see history repeating itself there, and when I say that, I'm thinking of ancient Athens in Greece, when Athens was a democratic country, but started to police what other countries around them, their allies, will live by and by what rules. And one by one, they joined Sparta. And of course, we know as history unveiled itself, the Spartans came back with all their former allies, which became enemies, and then turned around and invaded Athens. And it's quite ironic, America being a democratic country and, Russia being a communist country. It seems to be history repeating itself.
It very well could be. The long-term power politics really haven't changed. Peace was declared with the end of the Cold War, but that was really a facade. Peace didn't break out. Just peaceful representations. A smiley face broke out, but the real long-term implications and long-term goals of both countries have really never changed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, former allies a very short time ago, Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia, one after another, they're being converted into enemies. And
right. And just look at Turkey. I think that's a prime example. Turkey, here it is, ostensibly a member of NATO, basically turned its back on the West and has turned toward Islam. And we may very well see a repeat of the Ottoman Empire by the time all is said and done. Turkey, 10 or 15 years ago, would have never dreamed of being an enemy of the United States or Israel, and now it's already an enemy of Israel and soon to be an enemy of the United States.
What implications do you see these sanctions placed on Russia are going to have? It doesn't seem to be very effective.
Well, Russia does have, the ace up their sleeve for the Russians is, of course, natural gas. As far back as the 1970s, they started signing these treaties and trade agreements with the Western powers, providing inexpensive natural gas to France, Germany, basically all of continental Europe. And with that came the ability to eventually say, embargo on and close off the tap. That could very well happen if a shooting war or even just a talking war breaks out. I know that Russia loves having that revenue, but their economy is now to the point where they could actually live without it, at least in the short term. So that's the real clout that they have in the whole European strategic situation.
Jim, I want to touch on the Ebola virus. Jim, talk to us, okay? It seems to me that it's another rerun of the same play, only with different characters. I'm sensing a nationwide vaccine netting billions to the very same corporations that had brought you the wonderful world of GMO. What are your thoughts on that, Jim?
Well, I don't think it's just going to be a repeat of the SARS epidemic, which turned out to be a non-issue. I think that Ebola has proven itself to be a pretty wily little character, and it undergoes a lot of mutations, and all it would take is one additional receptor mutation, and it could be easily transmissible airborne, and we could see a worldwide pandemic. Right now, the risk is moderate, but it could flip over into high risk at any given time, depending on, because of the long incubation period for this, and during that incubation period, people are contagious. So it's a pretty bad combination where you've got a hemorrhagic disease with a high lethality rate, a long latency period, and loose border controls. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster right there. So I think it's important that families get prepared for a pandemic, that the families be prepared to hunker down for an extended period of time. That means a lot of logistics, and it's going to mean some sacrifices, because for most folks who have 9-to-5 jobs, it may mean quitting your job and saying, sorry, boss, I'm not going to be coming in for the next X number of months. I hope you have a job for me when I get back, but I have to check out at this point. Because if you don't check out of your work, you may check out of life.
Are you going to be providing on survivalblog.com a little bit more in-depth ideas for your listeners and my listeners on possibly how to best prepare for that?
Well, yeah, there's already quite a bit of information there. The crucial thing would be stocking up on protective masks. So you want to have them N95 or better. Because of the dimensions of the Ebola virus, it's around 80 nanometers. Well, the apertures in an N95 mask are 100 nanometers. Whoops.
Another fish through the net. Right?
So, and there you're talking considerable expense, and the replacement cartridges for them are fairly expensive. You'll need Tyvek suits. You'll need booties to cover your shoes. You'll need hundreds of pairs of gloves, preferably nitrile gloves, because people often have latex allergies. You'll need large quantities of hand sanitizer. You'll need a disinfectant that you can spray. Lysol is pretty decent, but there's actually better ones on the market. There's one that's sold under the brand name Hazarid, Hazarid. A couple of my advertisers on Survival Blog sell that solution, and they even sell a machine that can, a handheld battery-powered machine that can fog it rather than spray it to make it even more effective. But people need to think through just how, if they're going to hunker down, how they can isolate themselves, and how, if it goes on month after month, how they can still pay a few bills. Anyone who isn't set up for online banking and PayPal and Bitcoin probably should get that set up right away, and they should probably try to, as quickly as possible, transition as many of their bills as possible to automatic bill payments that are debited to your checking account or debited to your credit card automatically. That way you don't have to handle mail if you're hunkered down. And then beyond that, all you have to worry about is paying your taxes, and that's just a matter of writing a check and dropping it in the mail, and you can do that pretty safely. But that all sounds really simple, but when you think about the logistics that are required to have a family hunker down for 6 to 18 months, it's really daunting for a lot of people who aren't stocked up already.
All the more reason I feel for a plan B. I'm listening, and I'm just with what has just been said. I'm saying in the back of my mind, I'm saying, yeah, great, but without a grid failure, without a grid failure, without a grid failure, and electronics is wonderful, but when it works.
Exactly, Barry. You're right. And as I mentioned before, I think in my last interview with you, the power grids really are the real linchpins of modern societies. And if you live in a place where you're going to have stable power, even if the larger grid goes down, you'll be much better off. And that's one reason I like the American Redoubt region, is because we have so much hydroelectric power here. And even if the national power grids, we have 3 in the United States, an Eastern grid, a Western grid, and a Texas grid. Even if those grids were to go down locally here, our power will pop right back up. All of our power utilities already have plans in place that they practiced to automatically switch over and do what's called islanding their power. So that even if the national grids go down, we'll still have regional power.
That, I did a Southwest regional tour, and I noticed pretty much the entire Southwest region is all on wind power, these massive wind turbines, one after another.
Unfortunately, wind power, though, is very fickle. It mainly generates at night, and it nearly supplements grid power. Because of its instability, it's really not suitable for a substitute for grid power. Now, a home wind generator for someone who lives at a very high northern latitude or very far southern latitude might make sense. Say you're in northern Alberta or someplace like that, or the Yukon, where you don't have much sunlight in the winter. Wind power might make sense, but it's fairly expensive per kilowatt. And for home power, you're, of course, going to need a big battery bank to go with that. And once every 8 or 9 years, you're going to have to change those batteries, unless you go with nickel iron batteries, and then you got about a 20-year life, but they're more bulky. So there's a lot of things that people need to think through in terms of where they live and how they'll live with or without grid power.
That is so true, because various geographic locations, for example, where these were placed, pretty much 365 a year, there's about a 15, 18 knot wind, because it's right off the coast. And it's the same with solar power. Solar power is excellent in many countries as well as a backup, but people just need to think about backups.
Absolutely. Whether it's a seasonal backup or a daily backup, because you'll still need some source of power and lighting at night. So you can have a great solar system and give you all the power you need for, running a microwave and running a dishwasher and, pumping water and,
dishwasher, microwave? What's that, Jim?
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, for people who want to have a first world lifestyle,
I'm just having some fun.
If you have a climate that has sufficient solar power, but at night you're still going to need power from a battery bank, and there's a lot of maintenance that goes along with that.